All right. Good morning, people. It's Wednesday, September 13th. It's a beautiful day here in Milwaukee, and we have an incredible opportunity for you guys to learn what it is that makes these guys special, specifically as it relates to how they built their business all around listings. And for those who are paying attention at home, if you want to ask questions or whatever, throw them into the chat section and I'll help facilitate the dialogue and make sure that we get your questions answered. So feel free to throw it in the chat. Cool. All right. Rock and roll. And Jeff Nevin, we're starting with you. For those of you guys that don't know Jeff's down in the New Berlin office, been an incredible leader in that office, almost basically since day one. He's been with KW since inception, basically. For perspective, Jeff operates with a partner, Joe. Joe's an incredible human, a great dad, has a ton of kids. These guys run a great business, but also the coolest part about their business, in which that you should be most interested in, is in the last 12 months, these guys took 35 listings. Of the 35 listings, it represented 70% of their overall business. So they're a listing-based organization that focuses on how they win the deal by getting more listings. So Jeff, give us a high-level overview as to what it is that you and Joe do with Reliance Real Estate and how you have kind of built an organization that's mainly focused on listings.
Yeah, absolutely. So our main focus, as you said, is listings. You could take, 20 listings, but you can't take 20 buyers. So we've learned from the very early stages is let's find those listings, and how we really generate those listing leads is we're prospect heavy. We're the ones who dial on the phone about 3 to 4 hours a day looking for leads. So it's really basically our morning is 8 to 11, dialing, admin work maybe between noon and 2, and then after that it's appointments.
Yeah, the one thing I can tell you, and I will totally verify with you, is every time I see Jeff Nevin walks around the office with his headset on and is constantly walking around because the guy works the phones. And what I also think that is important to hear is the reason why in which that Jeff is successful is he understands that if he has to be consistent in his activities, and the results show up when he's consistent in his activities. And very few agents are able to list 35 homes in a year and make it 70% of their business. Well, Jeff, we'll come back to you as it relates to who you're calling and what you're doing. Cool. All right. Lauri Srok takes a different approach, right? Lauri's been an incredible agent and with a ton of influence in our innovation office over in Tosa. In the last 12 months, Lauri's kind of come into a boon of listing inventory. She took 58 listings in the last 12 months in a bit of a more different route than Jeff. Lauri, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you've kind of the baseline as to what your business is.
It's a hard one. I always used to say that I was lucky, but I think it's networking. It's getting to know the people around you, not just the buyers, not just the sellers. And I'll say it again, I was lucky, but I'm working with an investor and I've worked with other investors, and that's how I met this investor. So I would say it's networking.
Yeah. And Lauri, go a little bit deeper as it relates to your relationship with that one investor, because I believe they've been a big part of your listing inventory in the last year. Where did that relationship start? Like if someone's saying, okay, yeah, I get it, an investor, but like, how did you kind of come into a relationship with that individual?
Before working with this investor a couple of years ago through 20 through 22, I worked with another investor and sold over 100 houses of his. During that time frame, I met a lot of different investors. This is one of them, and we had a good rapport and developed a good relationship of how to show him homes and how to get deals done. I was, again, worked with him, networked with him, and didn't realize it. And he came back and said, hey, guess what? We're going to get rid of, would you be interested? And we're going to sell some of these. And I said, sure. I wasn't expecting the volume, but I'm okay with it.
Hey, you want to sell 50 listings? Sure, why not?
That's right. Well, it's wrapping your head around the organization of all of that. That's the hard part.
Well, and I think what the group should be hearing or listening to is it's a testament to the way in which that Lauri approaches her business every day. She earned the opportunity at the business she has been given because she did her prior business at such a high level that someone said, huh, you might be the right fit for me and what it is that I want to do because I like the way in which you approach your business. And that's a testament to the brand and reputation that you've built for yourself, Lauri. Congrats.
I will say that in my past 20 years, this has happened probably at least 2 other times where I've ended up with multiple listings because of somebody I worked with on the other side. So I think it's surprising even myself looking back and saying it's really important to not just work with the people you're working as agents with, so agent to agent, but you never know what's going to happen with that side.
Totally. Cool. All right. Nada's out in Lake Country. Has been in this business for a few years now. What I love about Nada is her persistency and aggressiveness. In the last year, she's taken 8 listings. It represents 60% of her business, right? So that you're seeing a theme here, guys, that we're talking to people that it represents more than half their business versus the inverse, which is usually the way in which people start. Like Nada, not having done this forever, like how is it a way in which that you kind of came into this industry in your approach that allowed someone to trust you with their largest financial asset pretty quickly?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's actually the way that I've succeeded is completely opposite to Jeff, which I need to do. And by the way, the 2 of you are ballers. It's hard to follow the 2 of you. I was really proud with my list until I heard yours. But really, when I thought about it, because I knew the questions would focus on something along these lines, it's completely my sphere of influence that I've been harvesting, and trust as far as how I've landed the listings that I have, the ones that I have in the pipeline. Those people are cumulatively from my entire life. They are from 10 years of serving as a president on a nonprofit board that was not self-serving for my business. I gave that back to my community. My church community, if you know anything, if you have any friends that are Serbian, you know how tight-knit we are and we stick together. And so a lot of people trust me because you get very intimate with people on listings and you see a lot of things. The veil comes back on listings, and sometimes people won't work with you because of that. And I've learned that the hard way a few times, and it stings, but it is what it is, and you just got to keep going and move on. But really, I see Kathy Popovich is on this. She said this a few years back when I worked on Team Trimble. Real estate isn't a job, it's a lifestyle. So even when I was volunteering at my church picnic 2 weekends ago and I'm serving baklava and my hands are sticky with sugar, there was a guy that came up to me out of nowhere and said, "Hey, I heard you're a real estate agent. I need your help with X, Y, and Z." And I'm pulling out my phone and trying to type in his information because he didn't have a business card on him. And to Lauri's point, he's a huge real estate investor. And so now I'm connected with him, and he enjoyed my tenacity of putting everything down for that minute, capturing the moment, and then keeping going with what my task was, which was serving baklava at my church picnic. But that's really how I continue to build my business and why it's hard to be in the office. I'm always moving around to somewhere, some kind of networking that puts me in front of people, because no one wants to talk about, hey, would you like to sell your house today? I mean, how cheesy is that? But it's the relationship building that I've cultivated over 25, 30 years of time. I started when I was 5.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, what I love, Nada, of talking to people like yourself or having them on panels is ignorance is totally bliss. Like you don't know the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things. Here's the one thing I know about Nada because I've seen it in person. She just goes and does it and makes a mess of it and then says, great, of the mess I just made, where it is that I can find bits and pieces of diamonds amongst the coal of the mess I just made. And that's the beauty of people who get into this business and have success quickly is they don't worry about the mess in their wake. They just go and get stuff done. And then they're like, huh, that worked. Okay, let's keep going, All right, Jeff, I'm going to flip it back to you. You touched on something in the very beginning that talked about like You and Joe are on the phone 8 to 11. You're very structured. You're very regimented. You do the activities that 95% of people are afraid to do. Who is it that you're calling and how you're going about doing it?
So it's always been, expireds and for sale by owners. That's like the beginning of how we started. I think like right now it's about 40% of our listings are expireds. Things are a little bit changing. So when you're in a market right now where there's not a lot of expireds because homes are selling, right? So we had to ask ourselves who else is raising their hand on who has to sell, and you're looking at the older generation who is can't take care of the house, maybe passed away, and then the family members had to sell it, and then you have divorces and job transfers. So what we started doing is targeting neighborhoods, and you can actually look these up on homeowners that have lived in their house for 20 plus years, 40 plus years, and then really dialing those specific numbers and then asking how long they lived there, when do you plan on selling, like just like that. So it's really targeting the people who have to sell. We still incorporate expireds and for sale by owners every day because you still get a list. We just have to supplement that list because it's getting shorter.
Totally. But what I love in which your approach is everyone sees the market as hot, 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 but you really haven't changed your approach even in the last 3 to 4 years. You say, look, 40% of my inventory comes from expireds. People are still going to expire because someone took the home too expensive or this, that, and the other, and you're picking up the phone and calling. And then the other 60% of his business, in which that I hope you guys heard, was how intentional and purposeful is and as it relates to those that he's calling. How long have they been in their house? What is their mortgage? What does the remaining mortgage on the house look like? Do they understand how much equity they have in it? And so it's not like he's just picking up a yellow or white pages, for those of you who know what a white pages is, and is like, all right, let's call this number. All right, let's call this number. He's saying, no, what's the likelihood and way in which that these people are going to list? And then let's go target them.
Can I
And
add
Jeff,
something?
yeah, totally.
So I think a common misconception I get from other people is when I do dial, let's say expireds, for example, we'll use that. I don't land the listing appointment on that phone the majority of the time. It's having a good conversation and then adding them to your database with some kind of follow-up plan. And I think that's where most of agents tend to fall off, is even, let's say you get realtor.com leads, right? So you pay for those. A lot of the times agents only call them and have a conversation once, but then never really follow up with them again, when it might take 4 or 5 conversations before you actually get the listing appointment. So if calling is a strategy, you have to have some kind of follow-up plan.
Fortunes in the follow-up. So Jeff, one quick follow-up question that someone asked within the chat section is, what is the resource of information you're utilizing to tell how long they've been in the home? Is it tax records? Is it somewhere else? Like, where are you looking for that?
So are you guys familiar with RPR? And I'm sorry, NARPR, sorry, that one that we have the free subscription to. So
Yep.
You could actually, okay, so for example, you have a new listing that goes on the market, right? And you want to call around and you want to find the homeowners that have lived there, because if you're going to call around and invite people to the open house, let's talk to the people who might want to sell. You could actually filter in how many years that they've lived in the property, and that's free. You just have to get a dialing service if you want to do that. We use Vulcan 7 and the Red X. They have a thing called Vortex that pulls geo leads for us.
Cool. That's awesome. Appreciate it. Lauri, so, for the last couple of years I've known you, besides the one investor that's been unloading, I mean, you've been well-versed in the investor game for a little while, right? What makes the skill set of working with investors unique, and how is it different from, let's just say, the families that Nada's helping who, has a life event or this, that, and the other? Like, how is the investor transaction slightly different than a family that's looking to move their home?
For listing?
Yeah, like on the listing side.
Totally different. I still work with the other houses.
Yeah.
So usually when I went into the other houses, you go in and you give them an idea of what they need to do to sell the house. You know, you should put a coat of paint, you should rearrange your furniture, you should stage, you should whatever, and do a price analysis. With a investor, with the amount of houses I do, I basically do a price opinion. I run through the house and, you know, as quickly, about 15 minutes, take some photos from myself, take photos for the listing. It's a matter of being quick about it, but also absorbing what's wrong with the house, what's not wrong with the house, what's going on around the neighborhood. A total different viewing of that house versus viewing it if it's a family who's selling their house and, you know, it's the one. So then I do the price opinion, send it to the seller. The seller throws in his 2 cents and we get it on the market. The steps are so different. I mean, when I list another house, I went the other day to see a house. We'll do photos, we'll prepare it, we'll have professional photos taken. It's totally different. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. What you're getting to is there's a difference between the transactional aspect of a investor transaction and the relational aspect of, let's just call it more like the traditional residential real estate from the standpoint of like families who have to move for a variety of reasons.
There's no emotion in each of those houses for investors. Nothing. With a family, with a couple, with a single person, there's emotion. They put their heart and soul into that house for 2 to 20 to 50 to 90 years. So
Totally. It's the relational versus the transactional, and understanding the lens in which that you have to come in order to serve your fiduciary at the highest level.
Yep.
Do I need to be relational or do I need to be transactional?
Yep.
Well, and Charlie, can I add to that too? Because I've done some duplex and multi-unit listings as well. And the investor community purely just cares about cap rate. They do care. So how much money is that listing going to make that investor? And so you have to understand how that works, all the expenses, what are the improvements that they would need to make that's cash out of their pocket that isn't part of buying the house and renting it. And sometimes there's 2 very different prices. Let's take a duplex, for example. When an owner lives in it, the price is going to be higher. It'll be worth more if the condition is good. But if it's really run down and the chances are that someone isn't going to live in it or an investor is just going to buy it to rent out both units, that might be, investors always want the lowest price. There's never a chance where they're going to pay top dollar. They want to make money on it on the front end. So you almost have to straddle depending on what the listing is. If it's a duplex townhouse area, how it's sometimes tricky to price it because you don't want to price it too high and you scare away the investors. But at the same time, you want to do your seller a service by pricing it properly. If it's going to be owner occupied, it's worth more, in my opinion.
I think that just to jump in back in there again, the one thing with pricings for investor properties is, yes, there's a ton of investors out there and they don't want to pay top dollar. They want me to represent them. They want, you know, to give me a 30,000 under the asking price. I represent the seller. The one thing about pricing it is we do have other people who want to buy a house and move in. This is a first time price for somebody who can afford it. They'll do FHA, they'll do conventional loans. So if we get that buyer before the investor plucks it off for a cheap price, that's actually what we would like, more than giving it to the lowest price out there. So seller looks at it totally different than the buyers look at it. So, and there's different buyers, multiple different buyers.
Totally. All right, Jeff, I'm going to jump back to you here. Not so much in the investment angle, but more so the lens in which that you're helping families or different people. And, you know, what are some of the common objections you're hearing as it relates to one of the things I loved that you said? It's you're not picking up the phone and calling them once and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, Jeff, Joe, come on over. Let's list the house, right? Like it may be 4 or 5 times of a conversation before you get the opportunity to go over there. And, or one of the things you could also touch on too, because I've seen this, Jeff will get I'm actually ready to list now. And Jeff will literally throw his headphones off. He jumps in his Tesla and he flies over to the listing appointment in the next 5 minutes because he understands fortunes in the follow-up, right? So 2-part question. One is, what are some of the common objections that you're getting and how do you see through that in order to keep going as it relates to 4 or 5 touches? And then the second piece of it is how you train yourself in the moment that when they finally get to a yes, that your follow-up is, when can I get the appointment? Is it today? Is it an hour from now? Is it 2 hours from now? Is it tomorrow? If that makes sense, the 2-part question.
Yeah. I think the most common objection is I'm going to wait until maybe next year, or I'm going to hold off for a little while. And then how I combat that is I always say, if you knew that you can make more money now than opposed to waiting until XYZ, 2 months, a year, would that change your timeline? That does 2 things. One, it tells me their motivation, because if they're like, nah, we're good, I think we're still going to wait till next year, put them up in a follow-up plan, right? So every quarter until we're ready to go. If they're like, yes, that's when I push for, obviously, an appointment, just asking them, okay, let's make this more of an opportunity to discover if it makes sense to do it now or to wait until whenever they're ready. So that's mainly the objections I'm hearing. And then I'm sorry, the second part was what, Charlie?
Like, how do you get to the point where you feel as if you can go for the close to say, well, why don't I just come over now to help you get an understanding as what this looks like? What is it that you're sensing or seeking, or the information that you're gathering that tells you, bing, they're ready?
Yeah, well, if they're giving me any good indication that they want to hear more is when I kind of go for the close.
Got it. Yeah. And to the point I made earlier, I've seen Jeff literally run out of his office and fly into his car, and he's getting over there because he can't afford the next person to get in before him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, if you can, don't wait longer. Don't get in as soon as possible, because they're excited about it. They're intrigued. Because I've had it where it's like, well, their availability is maybe 2 weeks out, and then you schedule it 2 weeks out, and you call to confirm and do the pre-qual. They just want to, you know, they want to wait again. It's because you had a long duration in time.
Totally. Or somebody else got in there within the 2 weeks that they said they were ready, and you're like, wait, hold on, I thought you said you weren't ready. Well, yeah, until XYZ person came in.
Yep.
Cool. All right, Nada, going back to you. You touched on this a little bit, but I want to go back to that, right? You said, oh, I've been developing this since I was 5 years old. I've been working at it for 30, 40 years, you know, whatever. Talk a little bit about how you approach. I firmly believe that like real estate's a lifestyle. You're not allowed the opportunity to turn it on and turn it off. Like when you go to the grocery store, you're on. When you go to kids' soccer game, you're on. When you go to church, you're on. Like, talk a little bit about your mindset of like how you find balance in that, and how you dive deeper a little bit in terms of information gathering as to those you choose or want to work with.
Well, I haven't found balance, so short answer there. That's hard. That's actually a really hard question. Can anyone on this panel say they found balance in the career? I mean, I really can't turn it off anymore. And I am a quietly competitive person as well. I'm the extroverted introvert, which everybody is mind blown about. So I'm even seeing myself talking here is very intimidating. And I know I need to do more reels and videos, but really like how you have to be very careful. You don't want to shove down your sphere's throat that the only conversation that you can have with them is a real estate conversation. But what I find is that many people, even if you don't bring it up, everyone wants to talk about it. Not, are you busy? How are you doing? Is the market great? I mean, it's like the market is great depending on who you are and what you're looking for. If you have a parent that just passed away and you need to get rid of that house, the market is the market right now that you need to sell it in. You're not going to wait a year. So you have to be a service to the people that you speak with. And that's the number one rule that I lead my business with, is not that I'm selling real estate, but that I'm providing people with a service. And everyone deserves a luxury service, whether they're selling a $200,000 starter home or a $2 million house on the lake. And so everybody wants to feel special. Everybody wants to feel important. And it is the biggest investment of their life. Imagine if someone called us up and said, "Hey, I want you to take $300,000 and invest it in Disney. Are you going to do it? And how would you do it? And how would you approach it?" It's the same thing, only we're taking their $300,000 house or whatever it's priced at. So people know when they work with me that I'm very intentional. I'm going to do things that, the traditional agent typically does not do. A lot are my friends and family. So if they want me to call the electric company to handle something because English is their second language, I do it. But I also don't compromise on my commission. For the most part, I'm at 6%. With most people, friends and family, I do go down to 5 because how can't I? That's just how I feel I need to invest in the relationship. But then they go and tell all their friends at work, all their people that they're on the soccer team with, this is who you have to work with. And that word of mouth PR, which is what I did for 25 years, then that turns into more business for myself.
Just, I think two things there. One, it's okay to hear, like, I think everybody's trying to figure out what balance is, right? Like, I don't know if you ever find balance. It's always leaning one way or the other. And it's okay to say, like, I think it's a constant journey to try and figure out what that looks like. I think the other piece of it that I heard in that conversation was how intentional and purposeful she's been in her relationships, whether it's through church, whether it's through the nonprofit she led, because the other way in which you think about this, and I've heard this from my mom a ton, if you lead a nonprofit or if you help raise money or if you help do all these things and you show someone the way in which that you can do that at a high level, and they say, gosh, Nana did that at such a high level, I'm sure that she does her real estate business in a very similar manner, right? And there's the old bold law, like the way you show up here is the way you show up everywhere. It's true. And people notice that in the way in which that you handle your business outside of the real estate space, which is why I say that it is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Okay, Lauri, I'm going to ask you a different question, right? Been in this game for a long time. Like, what are some of the things that you've seen over your 20-year career that have changed, and or what are some of the things in the 20-year career that like really hasn't changed in the way in which that you approach this business, or that you're paying attention to from a trend standpoint of seeing trends kind of come and go, or things have been relatively stable or consistent in terms of how you approach your business?
No, I think the market constantly is changing and there's constantly things you have to watch. Everybody's big thing is, why is the market the way it is? And you have to have an answer. I do subscribe to Keeping Current Matters. It's kind of my newspaper. But it's also, I don't know, reading the articles that come across and knowing that interest rates are high, but they're going to go down. What comes up is going to come down. Your market's going to change. People aren't selling because they have a 3% interest rate. I mean, it's watching the rates. It's watching the inventory. I watch the hot sheet on MLS to see what comes up on the market. I'm still watching for clients that house that they've been waiting 5 years for. I have emails sent to me from MLS. Instead of bombarding my clients, I bombard myself with neighborhoods that they're looking for. I've done that for years. I think right now it's watching the inventory, and I don't see it coming back as fast as people would like it to. There's not a way for it to come back that quickly. It's not getting involved mentally in the, oh my, it's so terrible and the market's so bad and there's nothing to sell. Don't get involved in that. Watch and work for your client and finding what's going to work for them. Maybe that's growing over the last few years and watching the bubble and how it all went and tanked and then came back like crazy. We had crazy years and now it's kind of level and diving because inventory is not there. But I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's watching the market and it's networking with people in the meantime.
Well, here's two things I heard from you. One, a matter of perspective on the market is important. And what I mean by that is two things. One, you have to be the economist of choice because people are coming to you for answers. And so when they come to you for answers, you better have the answer. And that doesn't mean, well, I'm not really quite sure. Wrong answer, right? The second thing is a matter of perspective is important because what goes up must go down and what goes down must come up. And so that, Lauri, I mean, I think I know you well enough from the standpoint of you never really get too excited, right? Like I deal with agents where they get really excited and then they're a mess, and then they're really excited and then they're a mess. Like Lauri is just steady Eddie because she has a matter of perspective of a 20-year career to say, look, the current market of the moment is what the market of the moment is, and what goes up must go down, and what goes down must go up. And we're just in a cycle in the way in which it is, but I know how to serve you in navigating a really complex issue.
I used to get all worked up at the end of the year thinking, oh my God, where's my business going to come from next year? And I had a friend who said to me every year when I'd say this to him, and he'd say, your business is always fine. It's, you always have things going on. And I'm like, I just sold my whole sphere. It's all gone. I don't have any more. They all moved out of the States. And he, this friend of mine used to say, you're always worried about it and it's always fine. And I think mentally over the last few years, it's like, yeah, it's fine. It's all good. But I do know that the fall is the building of the spring. So it's not to be complacent and sit there and feel like, oh, it's all gonna be fine. You still have to do what you do and keep doing it, even though you're not seeing things coming back to you. It's coming back. It's going to come back in the spring. So I mean, advertise, I mean, network and all that stuff.
It's like tulips. You plant the tulips in the fall for them to bloom in the spring.
Yep. There's a lot going on underground.
Totally. All right, I'm going to wrap it up and we're going to go around the horn. Jeff, as the market shifted for you guys, right? Like you've been really intentional and purposeful. Again, I go back to I love the way you operate. It's the way in which everyone says, well, it's not how I want to operate. And you're like, yeah, well, a lot of people do, and they're really successful. What is it that you've seen in the way in which the market has gone, and how are you continuously focusing on where it is that you're staying consistent as to who you are, despite if days on market are at 15 or whether at 150? You haven't changed what you're doing. You're still calling FSBOs and expireds to find 40% of your business, and the other 60% comes from your database and sphere. Talk about that mindset and how you approach people in that, so that you're consistent in that you're steady Eddie. You're not too high with the market, you're not too low with the market.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, to get listings, you have to have contacts with people. So, I mean, that's really dumbing it down. Is the only way that you're going to get new listings is by talking to some people. So, the market has definitely shifted. So it's now, who are we talking to? How are we getting those conversations? So instead of spending, let's say, an hour working expireds and having those conversations, I have to switch it to maybe a half hour when I try to dial and talk to a different generation, in this case, to find business. So to stay steady Eddie, like you're saying, it's identifying what's working and what's not by utilizing what we're good at. So it's switching it to who we're contacting.
And let me just ask you one, to dive a little bit deeper. How intentional you are as it relates to your ratios. You say you call from 8 to 11. Do you know how many dials you need to make in order to define a day successful? And a day isn't successful based on appointments, based on how many people contact. Have you figured out those ratios to know?
Yeah. So I need to talk to about 20 people a day. Now that doesn't even result in a listing appointment that day. I can't say that by doing that consistently, one day it might be no listing appointments with 20 contacts, but then the next day I might get 2 because I contacted 20. But I would say it's roughly about 20 contacts a day. And then just, if you really want it just real quick, like today, because we have a dialer. So it was, how many dials? So 32 conversations, actually 72 dials for 10 contacts so far.
72 dials for 10 contacts. And what I also want you to hear is he knows he only has to dial 20. I mean, he has to contact 20 people a day. He doesn't have to do 100. He doesn't have to do 80. It's 20. And it's a pretty simple formula that he knows if he does the 20, the results of the activities then show up further.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like dialing might not be for everybody, right? That's why not everybody does it. There's all different forms of being able to get in front of people. You just have to recognize I have to talk to people to get business, whether it's open houses, door knocking, networking, whatever it may be. If you're not having the conversations, you're not going to get the listings.
Totally. All right. Deej wants me to ask a question, and I've seen this, is more so of just diving one step further, peeling back the onion one more time. Talk a little bit about your mindset around script practice and role play. And I know that you believe in the theory of practicing on your clients is malpractice. Like, what does that look like for you? How are you practicing your dialogues? How do you get comfortable in that way?
So Joe and I, every morning before we start dialing, we do like a practice run, whatever we want to do that day. And it doesn't have to be a run through of an entire conversation. It's mainly talking about maybe an objection that we heard a lot the prior day. So it's kind of practicing those every day. Again, it's not just for getting the appointment, but it's also practicing your listing appointment. Like, you got to get people to sign on the dotted line. And what do those conversations sound like? So, answer your question, it's daily practice. Daily practice.
Daily practice. Every day. Intentionality and purpose. All right, Lauri, any final parting thoughts or ways in which, you've been around, seen a lot of different things that have worked, things that didn't work, or things that you're focusing on? Final thought?
Oh.
Put you on the spot.
I think I built my business originally 20 years ago from doing 2 to 3 open houses a weekend. They're not there anymore. So, I mean, that's not something that you can do, but if you can, definitely do them. Sometimes they're a bit insane because you get too many people who come in. I don't do anymore because I don't feel that the opportunity is there as much as it used to be. And plus, I just don't do them anymore. Since COVID, I think I cut them out. But I've also been doing investment properties, which you just don't hold open. I would say it's networking and working on your connections with everybody, as well as with your buyers, sellers, keeping constant contact with your past sellers somehow, whether it's phone calls, whether it's sending them something, but keeping in contact. Those are my biggest things, really. I used to do a lot more mailings. They seem to have also gone down in value, although I probably will continue to do some to stay in front of people. So
here's what I would challenge the group with is, where are you spending your money and how are you seeing a return on your investment?
Exactly.
And 95% of agents I talk to say, well, I spent $500 on this mailing. Great. What did that turn into? The question on whether mailings are effective or not isn't it's a yes or no question. The question is was it effective in helping you generate more business? And if you can correlate what it is and where you spent your dollars into the business that you got, then it's an effective tool, right? Like, if you aren't tracking your numbers and treating your business like a business, then it's just you're spending money to spend money, but you don't know how you spent it or where it came from or where it's going. So then, last point I'd make on this is, just because I've had this conversation a million times with agents, when they're in the rut, the roller coaster ride, and they're on the low point, and I say, well, where did you get your business in the last 2 years? Well, you had 24 pieces of business. Great. Those 24 people, what were the sources? I'm not really sure. Well, okay, so how do you know where to find your future business if you don't know where your past business came from? How do you know where to spend future dollars if you don't know where your past dollars worked for you? If you aren't tracking it, you won't know, right? And I think that's the point of, like, Lauri's looking at her time value of her investments and saying, is this a good piece of my time or is this a good spend on my dollars? And then redirecting accordingly based on where the market is. Cool. Sorry, that was a little purview. I'll jump off now. Nada, last thoughts. You've talked a lot about relationships, talk a little bit about investments. I know one thing that she didn't touch on that I know she's incredibly intentional to, that I'll plug for her, is her husband runs a small business, an accounting firm that does great work, but also they share clients, and that they lead generate for each other in a way in which that it becomes a household business, not just a my business or his business. It becomes an our business in the way in which that you support each other. Last parting thoughts, just talk a little bit about that. Like, a lot of people say, well, I don't get my husband involved. I don't get my spouse involved. I don't get my partner involved. And you're like, wait, what? They have a database too. Like this is a team sport here. We're all paying the bills together. Like talk about that team sport mentality.
Well, first of all, if you fall in the bucket where you don't know how to marry the two businesses, call me and I'll talk to you about it in greater detail. It is actually very delicate because he doesn't want his clients to feel like I'm being shoved down their throat, and then vice versa. Like we have a great service to provide to each other's spheres. And we're actually talking about co-branding a few things very strategically together right now. Just tchotchkes, like we have pens with both of our numbers on it, and little things that mean a lot. But he does give me opportunities to get in front of clients who might have to unload a bunch of investment properties like Lauri. That doesn't always translate into business right away. There's one guy that I'm just waiting for him to start selling off his things. But the relationship aspect of it, at the end of the day, for me, is what has created my initial success in the business. And I hope to take that up higher. As far as blending the two together, it depends on what that other spouse is doing, and then how is the best way to leverage that outreach so that it doesn't feel like it's like, used car salesman reaching out to me to sell a house. It's got to be really organic and extremely genuine.
Well, and I can speak from experience with a spouse in the business, right? Like it comes from a place in the way in which that Nada builds her brand and reputation can stand alone by itself. And similarly to me, with someone who doesn't hold a license or help people buy or sell homes, when someone asks me a question and I'm like, well, hey, like if you're interested, Megan can help you if you're interested. Otherwise, these people can help you or whatever. But like, if not, it's not as if I'm pushing an agenda or an objective. It's just simply, I want her brand and reputation to stand on alone because she's developed it, nurtured it, and taken care of it. And that if people view it in the same way, great. And if not, I'm not pushing it by any means because I have to maintain the relationships for other aspects of my life that are more important than me trying to do another deal. And it's similarly to the way Nada's husband runs her business. I know he says Nada has to earn the opportunity. I'll put her in the batter's box, but she's got to swing the bat and hit the ball. So there you go. Jeff, Lauri, Nada, thank you guys for jumping in. Appreciate your guys' time, attention, and detail. And thanks for giving back to the community.